All right. Welcome to episode 3 of the A24 New Wave. You might hear about another episode 3. That is episode 5. You'll see. I'm talking to the people. They will see because Zachary Bryant is our first. You're actually our first real guest. I shouldn't say real guest, like I had Jill on, but the first person to talk about a movie on this feed. So do you want to introduce yourself and tell people about what your
Sure,
thing
sure.
is? What's your thing?
Yeah, well, I'm honored for you to have me on so early. I really appreciate that. So, my name is Zach Bryant. Some of you, we have some overlap. Probably heard me on They Live by Film. I've showed up on the Radiance podcast. I've showed up on Reconnected. So, if you've seen any of those, you may recognize my very, very southern voice. We do a podcast where we do interviews mostly about like physical media, and we just talk about a lot of random movies that we know the other person's going to hate. So, yeah, I think that sums me up pretty well.
Okay. Well, I've been on actually, well, all three of those that you mentioned, and they're a lot of fun. And I had a great time with you guys on They Live by Film. So that's Adam Lundy and Chris. I forget Chris's last name. Sorry,
Haskell.
Haskell. Of course. Yeah, I do. I knew that, Chris. Don't hate. But yeah, it's that's more of a laid back friends show, which those are fun. So I enjoy those. But thank you for coming on. I kind of knew, but I didn't know to the extent you're a massive A24 fan. So
Mhm.
you've been a good, I guess, person on my side with this project, and we've been chatting on some Discord servers and having a lot of fun. So it's really exciting for me. And so we are going to talk about a really exciting and important topic is, well, the filmmaker Osgood Perkins. I guess we'll call him Oz. That's what he goes by, right?
I've seen him credited as both. I think he started as Oz and then it switched to Osgood. I don't know. So I we could probably interchange it at this point.
We could call him Mr. Perkins.
Yeah,
um,
not to
but
be confused with his father.
yes, definitely not. Although I think that's a subject that is worth bringing up. So Osgood Perkins. So I'll just tee up in the context of A24 and my writing. I have a chapter about early A24 horror, which obviously I'm not going to get into in detail right now. But I'll just say that it's kind of like not what you'd think if you just think about A24. And Zach, I think you probably would agree with this, but it kind of started as like a mess, not really a mess, but like, there was did not see, I mean, Tusk is really arguably that first A24 film, and there's really nothing like that elsewhere in A24, maybe in the world of film. Tusk is pretty unique. And then you might say like Under the Skin, The Witch. I think The Witch is fair. A lot of people say that's the first horror, but I think when thinking about the things, I think of Under the Skin and The Witch as genre film, or I'm sorry, art films. So as much, maybe there's some Tobe Hooper inspiration, but there's as much Tarkovsky or Bergman or somebody else. Osgood Perkins, we'll have to settle on one of those. Is well, he started with The Monster as a producer, which was actually filmed prior to his debut, which is The Blackcoat's Daughter. But I want to say, and I could have this backwards because I wrote this a little while ago, a couple months ago, but I think that the Monster came out before this and didn't do that well.
It was a weird release, if I remember. I think DirecTV got an exclusive for the Monster, and
Mhm.
I don't know if that was. I can kind of see why. I like the Monster for what it is, but Bertino is kind of an acquired taste sometimes, so I don't know if
Yeah.
they knew what to do with it either.
Well, and that's just the case with early A24 is, and that the book goes into this. They did have a deal with DirecTV, and they were primarily, absolutely primarily at this point an acquisition company. So they'd go to festivals and chase these films, and they didn't get a lot that they wanted. Tusk was one of those that they went after pretty aggressively, and it was a big acquisition. But Bertino, if you haven't seen The Strangers, I mean, that's for sure his big hit. I think even to today, even though he's made a few others, but he mixes like social issues with his horror. And the monster, if you, I mean, I don't really put my opinion too strongly in the book, just because I'm writing more about the history and the stories about the filmmakers and the productions. but I kind of don't like the monster. I think it just doesn't live up to the ambition. Really, it's kind of like Locke in that it's all set in the car, but and some stuff happens, but they interweave the social and the character moments, which I've seen done well. But the monster's not one I'm crazy about. I think it's done a lot better with the relationship and the strangers. Um,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the one thing he did well on The Strangers is, and I think he tried to, yeah, I'm speculating, but I think in parts he tried to recreate that. You don't really see the horror that much. Like in The
mhm.
Strangers, it's so much background horror. You talk about like John Carpenter's Halloween. You're always looking in the background for something else. And I think he wanted to recreate that with the monster, but the problem with creature features is you got to see the monster a decent amount. And I
You
think towards the end, if my memory, you do, but I don't know
you
if the
do,
build
yeah, a
up,
little bit.
yeah, I don't know if the build up pays it off necessarily.
And I'm not so I'm going to bring up Cloverfield. Like Cloverfield,
Mm.
I'm not the biggest Cloverfield fan, but they did a good job of teasing the monster. And of course, you go back way back to the OG monster movie is Jaws. The OG blockbuster monster movie, and we know that. But yeah, I think I see where he was going. I think it was an ambitious. I don't want to say failure because I just it was a successful movie. It's on A24. A lot of people saw it. Not as many people saw The Strangers, but it did give Osgood Perkins a chance to direct well, kind of a stepping stone to directing. Just being involved. So so his first is The Blackcoat's Daughter. This is his first A24, first and only A24 film, and I think this was 2016. And I think this actually is a good entry point to his work. Now, most people probably the entry point is Longlegs, which
Mhm.
just came out. But I think I fell in love with the Black Hood's Daughter at first watch, which was just like about 6 months ago. I was like, this is the vibe that I really love. So I put it on my horror list, which I know you've seen, and yeah, so I can't wait to write more about it. And kind of course, I don't want to spoil it, and I won't spoil it in the book, but in this case, I really want to because it's so good. You almost can't unpack it without spoilers. But what? So can I ask, what was your first exposure to Osgood, and was it this or was it something
It
else?
it was Blackcoat's Daughter. I think the first time I saw it was on Netflix back when they had a better horror catalog. So they'd always have things like that. Just randomly watched it, didn't watch a trailer, and I really did. I fell in love with it then. I'm a big fan of Osgood Perkins for all four of his movies to a degree. The
Mhm.
middle ones I have more issues with, but I think he's such an interesting director that I'm never mad to watch something, even if I don't love it. But Black Coat's definitely a great one. It's one I've enjoyed. I think I enjoyed rewatching it more than I did the first time.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's why it's hard to talk about without talking about spoilers because it's kind of like what, but some films don't work on rewatch when they have a mystery. And so without spoiling, I'll just say that there is something that you're going to miss. I don't care how much you pay attention, you're going to miss it. It's very
Mhm.
confusing the first time. You might not even like it the first time. I think that's happened a lot. And then once you piece things together, or maybe go read Letterboxd or some other website and get spoiled, and then watch it again, I think it's. I mean, I picked up on it the first time, but I was very impressed. And one thing I talk about a lot in the book, or a little in the book, is the idea of scream queens, and
Mhm.
of course, I think for modern horror, I think the conversation begins and ends with Mia Goth. So that'll of course be in the Ty West chapter. But I think the case can be made for actually both leads, Emma Roberts and Kiernan Shipka as well. So I don't know. Does that hold water to you? And you can tell me no if you want.
No, I completely agree. Especially, I think I'm going to mispronounce her name. Shipka, is that how you say it?
I think
Sipka?
so. Kiernan Shipka. Yeah.
Yeah, she's one I'm always excited when I get to see her in something because I feel like she just I don't know if it's just I don't watch enough of what she does, but when she pops up, I'm always pleasantly surprised. She's at the beginning of Twisters, and I was so happy to
She
see
is.
her because that was such a big thing to see her in such small things. So I think I saw her in Long Legs like 2 months before that, and I'm like, that's cool to end up in
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, just those two. Well, I guess I wouldn't call Twisters a horror, but
No.
I have to look her up because I'm forgetting her non
She's
A.
at the very beginning.
Yeah,
She's yeah, so
yeah, yeah.
she's not in it long, but
Even though that's the very beginning, I won't spoil her scene, but her scene, even though I wouldn't call Twisters a horror, I would say that her scene is in line with a Scream Queen type of
Mhm.
performance. I think she's great, even in the very beginning. So I'm just pulling her up. And well, Red One, I don't know about that, but Longlegs, I think, is the big one. So before we get to that, so you mentioned the middle two, Perkins, and I'll be honest, I haven't watched those yet. I probably will by the time I get to the end of the book because I think that they're all in the conversation of the premise that I'm writing about, which is A24 New Wave, and I think horror is at the center of that. Usually, when you say A24, they think yeah horror for the most part or Ladybird. So what about Osgood's middle films? What do you said you don't like them as much?
Um, not as much. So the second one was I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, which is
Right.
an obnoxiously long title. But it, best way I can just go to describe that film, and it picks up a lot of things we were talking about, like with Blackcoat's daughter, and I'm sure we'll talk about with Longlegs, kind of like this unraveling mystery, and this like almost like this world building, like this small amount of world building that there's more going on than you're ever going to get the answers for. I think he does that pretty well in that one as well. But the problem, the first time you watch it is the slowest movie. It is glacially slow. It is really just somebody walking around a house. And the first time I despised it, I hated the movie. Years later, and I think it was like within the last 6 months, I finally sat down and said, "Okay, I'm gonna rewatch it, see what I think this time." And I liked it better. And I think it really paid off in the sense that I kind of went into the mentality of it's almost like when you read like an old 19th century horror novel, like Turn of the Screw or something, where it's not scary, but to that
Mhm.
audience, it was scary. And it's almost like he's trying to recreate that, like something ridiculous, like the person died of a heart attack because of a ghost. You know, that's stuff that would happen in those old novels.
Sure.
Not very
Yeah.
scary
Turn of the
in
Screw. Yeah.
nowadays, but
Yeah.
I think that's more of what he was trying to evoke. And I think he does that a
Mhm.
lot. He tries to evoke older type horror, which makes sense with his
Mhm.
lineage, that he seems to prefer that.
So yeah, that's the big elephant in the room, his lineage. So his dad is a Scream King. I mean, like,
Mhm.
kind of the OG. I mean, yeah, he didn't scream, but yeah, he created some screams. And I think that growing up in that atmosphere, well, yeah, I can see it in his work that he would like, old school type of horror. And I'm thinking more atmospheric. I mean, I think Psycho
Mhm.
actually, you could make an argument for that. But I love your the Henry James comparison. I think The Innocents is actually,
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen that, but Jack Clayton is
Excellent movie.
it is, and I think that's actually a good a classic comparison for the type of vibe that Perkins pulls off. But Perkins does not seem to be of the two movies I've seen. He does not seem to be like recycling things. So he seems to be somewhat original, but also not exactly like other horror filmmakers. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think he definitely has his influences, and I think to a degree he wears his influences on his sleeve. I think, Long Legs is one that's going to be brought up, but
Yeah,
Silence of the Lambs or Cure or something like that's going to be the comparison. But
great. Yeah.
he never. I don't think he ever fails to make those elements feel himself. Like I think
Mm,
one thing that made Long Legs stand out was the very beginning, saying there is psychic things going on. There's supernatural element here. I'm
yeah.
not going to lie to you about that. That's what's going on.
Yeah. No,
There's
no BS.
yeah, this is
Well, yeah, Longlegs. Longlegs has made him one of the top directors. I'd say one of the top genre directors for sure right now. But there's one more that we haven't mentioned, and that's Gretel and Hansel.
yeah.
And so that's another middle film. I think it's also with Netflix. Is that right? I think both of the
Uh
middle films are Netflix. If I
maybe.
could be
I
wrong.
know Shout
Yeah.
put it out, so I don't know if it was like
Okay.
permanently with Netflix.
I could be
Um
wrong.
yeah,
So
I'd have to look it up. But no, he that was one I think came out like either right before COVID or right after COVID started. So I know it
yeah.
didn't get quite the attention I think it was probably originally going to. And honestly, as far as like photography wise, I think it's his best looking film. It is a
Hmm.
very gorgeous
Okay.
film. I think it's one of those ones where even I think the runtime's only like 90 some minutes, and it
Hmm.
still feels like it should probably be like a 70-minute movie. I mean, there's not a lot to Hansel and Gretel as a story, and he does some like interesting things with it without going into spoilers. Like, it's more about Gretel than it is about Hansel. It's more about, the coming of age story of, a young teenage girl. And I think that's an interesting way to go about it. It does lose me. I think it just feels a little long, and I think that both times I've watched it, I'm like, yeah, this could be cut down a bit.
That's what's interesting is I looked at the rankings and the IMDb. I mean, really, none of his films have really ranked that high with audiences. So and I think that's actually just the case with A24, at least, just generally. Like the acclaim versus or I should say the critical acclaim and I'll say the cult acclaim, the
Yeah.
cult of A24 and the cult of modern genre films. I think we're into it, but they fool a lot of people to get people in theaters, and I don't think they would lie about that. I think that that is very much a thing. So yeah, I just looked, and Gretel and Hansel has like a 4 point something on IMDb ratings, so definitely not a big hit, at least critically. But yeah, we got to get to Longlegs. So I have not finished the late horror chapter. That's going to be fun. Let me just tell you,
Mhm.
because and I am bringing in peripheral films. It's about A20. I mean, the entire 80-90% of the book is about A24, but I also talk about the influences. I talk about other films. In fact, I'm going to have a chapter about like peripheral films that kind of like Julia Ducournau, her films,
Mhm.
Coraline Farget, of course, she got the Oscar nominees. Now those aren't very common, have much in common with this, but I'm sure I'll have to talk about Longlegs because I think it's um, a pretty big horror. I think it's going to move the genre a good bit. So, and of course, you have a big actor too. So,
Mhm.
I'm guessing is your love for Perkins cemented with Longlegs, or
It
yeah,
it is. I mean, I put Longlegs as of right now, it's probably like my favorite film this decade so far. I have a I have a
wow,
tremendous love for it. I do. And honestly, a lot of it came down to you're kind of hinting about like A24 and how they market to get people in. As far as Neon did, I think that is some of the
Mhm.
best marketing I've seen for a horror film in a long time. Like they really pushed like a sense of intrigue, and I think that helped. I think it did. Like I mean, I
Mhm.
remember they didn't even like name their trailers like it was a Longlegs trailer. They would like put an
Right.
ARG in it and just show you like a horrific scene, and it's like, what is this? Like that's such a neat way to go about it.
The funny thing is it became memes before, like, and that's where you get FOMO, is you see
Mhm.
these memes and you see, and the thing is Nick Cage plays uh, just a really unique character even for him. He's played so many unique eccentric characters, but this one is on a different level, and yeah, this is uh how do I put it? There's a lot of suspense, there's a lot of mystery, and there's a whole lot of Silence of the Lambs. So as you mentioned, his influences. I mean, I think that one for sure he wears on his sleeve. But that doesn't take away. I mean, it's not like a Clarice Starling kind of character. But yeah, I think it actually. So of course, M. Night Shyamalan has done similar things with his films, and I'm not saying it's all about the twist. I think it's more about the writing. I think it's more about the atmosphere, and you know, giving the audience a little bit of information, and then because it holds up on rewatches, which I would say that a lot of Shyamalan movies do not. So I don't know. What do you think? How many times have you seen it? I guess I'll ask.
Let's see. I saw it 3 times in theaters, and I've seen
Wow.
it 2 times since then.
Okay,
So,
so
yeah.
you've dissected this pretty thoroughly, and you could write a dissertation tomorrow. I might have
Wouldn't be a
you write a.
well-written one, but yeah, I could write one.
I'm sure you could. Well, so for anybody who has not seen Long Legs, what would you just say, like? What would be your high pitch, your high level pitch on why you should see this, and how should you approach this going in?
Um, that's a good question. So, I think if I was gonna pitch this to someone, because I'm looking at this as the perspective of my girlfriend does not like this movie. She has seen it twice. She has tried. I give her all the benefits in the world. So I
Yeah.
don't think I don't think it's going to resonate with absolutely everyone. I think it's a very strange movie. You're looking at into the mind of Perkins and the things he likes. So there's like some T-Rex as artist stuff in there. He obviously likes some hair metal type stuff, and I mean all that kind of gets lined in there. And there's just such an intriguing mystery. I was a big fan of Lost when it's coming. I'm still a huge fan of it.
Mhm.
And one of
Yeah.
my favorite elements is let's put all these like little hints in there and not give you direct answers, but give you something to come away with it. I think there's that level of interpretation about what's going on. Obviously, there's an ARG with it, and I think that's a lot of fun to go through if you want to. I don't think it's necessary, but it does add some stuff. But just,
Mm.
I think the good thing with the fun thing with Longlegs is you can get out of it what you put into it, and I think a lot of mysteries kind of miss
Mhm.
that. Like, I think an audience
I like
involvement
that.
is
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
No, it does really bring the audience in. I think it's a masterwork personally. I don't know if it was you, but if it's somebody else, but somebody else told me that this was before I was writing the book, that to decide whether you're going to take the plunge into long legs and really, if this is something for you, and not just go by the marketing and, but actually be discerning and decide whether you're going to wait or what. Somebody told me to watch Blackcoat's Daughter first, and
Mhm.
I did because I had missed that, and so I was very grateful because I really, really took to Blackcoat's Daughter, not as much as Long Legs, but like it is definitely a great entry point. And also exit point. If you don't like Blackcoat's Daughter, you might not be into Long Legs. Vice versa might not be true, but yeah, great. I can't wait to see where he goes in his career. I mean, he has the monkey is
Yep.
just about to hit theaters, so we'll see. Hearing great things. He's using the William Castle tricks, signing a
Yeah.
waiver of the audience. So I love that. Uh, were
Yeah,
you
the
gonna say
thing I
something?
like yeah, I was gonna say, with the monkey, one thing I'm actually looking forward to is as big as Longlegs was, and I'm not gonna say that movie's bleak, but it's definitely got a bit of a downer element to it. So for him to kind of switch gears and go to something like Stephen King's The Monkey, I think is a good call. Like go to a little absurd, like
Yeah,
put some show you humor because I wouldn't say I don't think his movies are humorless, but the humor is
yeah,
kind of dry. Like one of my favorite gags in Longlegs, which is I don't even know if you call it a gag. Instead of telling you what year it is, they just show you a picture of a president. Like even in people's homes,
yeah.
there's
I
like,
love
here's
that. I
Richard
love that.
Nixon, and I'm like, that's
Yeah,
just it's a funny gag, but it's not
yeah.
going to make you laugh. It's just be like, what is this?
It's better than a time, yeah, than a
Yeah,
card, a placard. But yeah, no, I think we'll see what happens with the monkey. But I think this is going to be another big step in his career, and yeah, it's another big step for modern horror. So Zach, great conversation. I'm kind of glad that he's our first horror
yeah.
director. I mean, technically, because we got the Safdies, we have David Lowery, and then we'll be talking about Alex Garland next. So yeah, do you want to tell people where to find you online?
Yeah, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts for They Live by Film. If you want to look at my bad takes. I just had a terrible take that I think Aaron hated with Fanny and Alexander. If you want to read those, you can find me at Dharma Bombs, which is a Lost reference. So, I get to bring that full circle.
Oh, yeah, I get it. I've wondered, and
uh,
yeah, you just had to say lost, and I got it. So,
but yeah, you find us there. And of course, I'm on them sometimes, but my co-hosts are also on Punk Vacation, which is a Vinegar Syndrome podcast. And Adam runs the official Radiance podcast. I think we can say official on that one. It's the other one we can't.
yeah,
But yeah,
well,
I think we can say,
unofficially
yeah,
official. Yeah.
yeah. Fran's been on it, so it counts.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and I was just on it, so and yeah, so it's a great podcast. But yeah, we'll put the links down in the notes, and yeah, thanks for hanging out.
no, thanks for having me, Arian.